Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to the This Week in Bitcoin show. Today is November the 2nd, 2018. Strong hand, long-term thinking, deferral of gratification. Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin. One Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. Unconfiscatable. Okay, it's that time of the week again, and we've got guests from all over the world. I'm in Santiago, Chile, but that doesn't matter. Giacomo Zucco is in Italy. Josh Olszewicz, I butchered his last name.
Oh, that was good. That was good.
Oh, it was good. He is on the East Coast somewhere in the United States. Are you in? Well, I don't want to give away your location if you don't want me to.
DC.
Okay, DC. Straight out of DC, man. I'm from Baltimore. And then we got Chris Gilliard is in Puerto Rico. And I've met Chris in person when I was hanging in Puerto Rico, but I'm really pumped because he's going to tell us about what's really going on there. I've never had a guest on that lives there, actually, that's sees all the changes that are going, although I was there that one time. But we're going to start off here. Remember, these guys' links are all below too if you want to follow them on Twitter and all that fun type of stuff. So we're gonna start off with the news that people were talking about in terms of on Halloween. It was the 10-year anniversary of the white paper, and Satoshi published it on that day 10 years ago, and some people were celebrating, some people were elevating him to a tremendous godlike level, God forbid, and then there were some that were saying, well, why are we, this is the day the paper was published. It didn't actually start, Bitcoin didn't start until January the 3rd of 2009. So we're really not at the 10-year anniversary yet. For me, I like actions. They speak louder than words, and I don't like to put dudes on pedestals. Obviously Satoshi did a great thing, but the worship out there, it's unbelievable sometimes. So Giacomo, what's your take on all this? And also, is the white paper some type of Bible, or is it like the Constitution, or is it a living document? Take it over, Giacomo. How you doing?
So my take is that we should have excuses to celebrate every time that we want, and if you want to celebrate Bcash on August the 1st, go along and have some whiskey or some beer or something. So I'm all for celebration for every possible excuses, but in this particular case, it's very fascinating that people is fighting about which kind of birthday or 10 years celebration we should actually have, because that means a lot of decentralization into narrative and memes as well. We can celebrate the pizza day, we can celebrate the Genesis block, or the first mined block, or the first transaction from Satoshi to Alfini, or the white paper publication, or the first code publication. We have a lot of celebration dates, and we should use them all, actually. The Satoshi white paper shouldn't be considered as a Bible. It should be considered as a super interesting historical document, as much as Nick Szabo blog posts about Big Gold, and as much as Adam Beck posts and publications about Hashcash, or David Chaum publication about eCash. That's the prehistory of Bitcoin, and that email in 2008 was the culmination of this prehistory of Bitcoin. So it was very interesting to me to see all the celebration. I'm absolutely pro celebration. Whenever I say somebody to read the white paper, I also always add that he should read the white paper along with the annotation about the wrong thing contained in the white paper. So trigger alert. I'm saying something which is inconceivable for most people out there, but Satoshi Nakamoto was wrong. I don't know if it was one human being or several human beings or several artificial intelligences, but in any cases, it was them, he was wrong, she. So I'm politically correct. Every kind of pronoun you want to use, it was wrong on some things. For example, he continues to, when you read the white paper, you see the mention of CPU power, which didn't actually stand for more than few months, because then people started to optimize to GPU and then FPGA and then ASICs, and basically any single algorithm you can think of can be printed into an ASICs, that by definition of deterministic algorithm, and so there is no such thing as ASIC resistance, and so that was the first mistake. And the second mistake was to, for example, he was saying that the Bitcoin nodes were following the longest chain. But in that case, you can create a longest chain with lower difficulty and just outlength the right chain. And so you had to actually change the implementation in order to fix this a few months later. And right now, any Bitcoin client, either Bitcoin client or altcoin clients like Litecoin or Bcash, they are all following this new updated version where you follow the chain with most the valid chain, not the generic chain, the valid chain with most hashing power, and not the longest one, the heaviest one. And then he calls node basically generating nodes in Satoshi white paper are basically the miners. But now the terminology is all changed, because now we have nodes that validate the rules without mining, and we have miners that mine without validating the rules, for example, with spy mining or blind mining and stuff like that. So validation and mining, they don't go along anymore. And also Satoshi there describes something called a simple payment verification, SPV, which is something that turned out not to work actually in practice. So it was a good idea if possible, but it turned out it was not possible so far, because you cannot have trustless fraud proofs. So it doesn't work. Basically, it requires switching from trusting the miners only to set the chronology to trusting the miner to define the rules, which would be something super easy to overtake from external parties. So I would suggest to read there is a Harding. It's on GitHub. Maybe I give you the link, Adam, so you can publish it later if you want. Okay. I write it on the chat. And this is a very good analysis of everything that was wrong in the white paper. So read it as probably the most historical moment, the most important historical moment, but not as the Bible. And also another very interesting thing to read is the discussion that followed. I'm putting the link of that as well. The discussion that followed the publication of the white paper. You should read that because it's very interesting. The second element in that discussion, that email thread, is this James A. Donald answering. That's very nice, but it doesn't scale at fundamental level. And then there is like Al Finney also speaking about upper layers and discussion about privacy and about mining centralization. There are a lot, and Satoshi answering that the miners cannot decide validity. They can just double spend, changing chronology. So it's super important to read this discussion as well, because it's very, very significant for the history of Bitcoin. So if you can publish the links, I think that would be something that we should do to celebrate this kind of first anniversary. Get somebody reading the annotations and the full email thread.
Wow. So the way we party is we give out homework here, people. you're learning. Well, I like that a lot. I've actually I'll add those links below this video. I sent them out to the public chat also right now. People want to click on them. So Josh, I heard you in the background there. What's your thoughts on there? Do you think the white paper dropped from the sky? And also, I want to say for Giacomo, what a positive spin he puts on this. Let's celebrate everything. Hey, man, that's the Italian way, I guess. Pound that freaking like button, people. Josh, what's going on?
Yeah, so no, I agree. I mean, it's important to recognize the event, I think, in the day. We wouldn't be here without it. But like you're saying, like the practical aspect of having a block, Genesis block, and then going from there, the fact that it's worked for 10 years it's a feat in its own right, you know? So yeah, there's lots of things to celebrate. I think worshiping it like people worship the Bible or the Constitution is a little much, but I think recognizing, you know, this was a special thing, a special time. And yeah, I haven't even read the annotations to the white paper, so I'm excited to go back and read that. I probably didn't read the white paper till like 6 months after I even got into Bitcoin, just because I was afraid. I didn't even know what was it going to even be about. Like my background isn't computer science, so but no, yeah, definitely interesting. I've read it several times since then.
I do have a follow-up question for you. Do you think he's put on a pedestal too much, Satoshi Nakamoto, that he is almost like a worshipped figure out there?
Well, like humans love this like legendary figure, like mystical thing. Like he kind of he or she or whoever kind of fits that, like being anonymous, disappearing. I don't think they've actually disappeared. I think they're very much with us, not like a spiritual sense, but a literal sense. Just because it's like anybody with like a serial killer, like they don't leave the scene of the crime. Like they're interested in like what happens, right? Like what's going on at the time and how things are doing. So I don't think Satoshi's dead. I think they're probably very much with us.
Do you think 10 years from now,
yeah,
people will care as much about who he was and just I call it the nonsense that revolve the cult of Satoshi? Do you think I would hope that in 10 years that that the crypto ecosystem has expanded so much and includes so many more people that it's just it's a footnote. Again, we're supposed to be a decentralized movement here, and that is one interesting centralized aspect of it. Although he has no control. I mean, he's gone, but there's a centralized obsession almost with it. So do you think in 10 years things will change, or will it still be the same?
I think it'll be the same as long as they're anonymous and as long as their keys haven't or their coins haven't moved, and as long as all the things that are the status quo now are continuing. I think it'll just be a perpetual like, who is this person? How many coins do they have? Blah 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 blah, just over and over again.
Yeah, everyone loves a mystery. Everyone they want to make a conspiracy out of it. Okay, let us go to Chris, who is making his debut from lovely Puerto Rico, where they definitely know how to party down there. So what's your take on everything that's been said?
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said. The thing that I would emphasize, though, is I think the 10th anniversary, to me, it's big because it's just a signification that it's 10 years and it hasn't broken yet. You know, all these Bitcoin obituaries and stuff, you know. And one of the things I try to push back on a lot is that this idea that we need all these new features, we need to add a bunch of stuff. I mean, Bitcoin just works. Even if it doesn't change from today, it works. And the 10-year anniversary is a big thing about that. The other thing I'd say is, you know, I agree with Giacomo that we should celebrate as much as possible. Each day, each of these anniversaries is a point in time that we can talk about it and get it out there more, you know, more of a reach to the mainstream media. So, you know, October 31st, January 3rd, which is the Genesis block, and also January 9th, which is the first block. Those are all days that we should, you know, talk about Bitcoin. Not that we don't talk about it every other day anyways.
Yeah, it's a positive that the mainstream media should pick up on. You know, they're not into positives when it comes to Bitcoin. Speaking of that, actually, you know, the New York Times just came out with an article, Bitcoin's first felon faces more legal trouble. And they're talking about Charlie Shrem. So, I mean, we can talk about that, but my point in bringing that up is that still, you know, instead of talking about, you know, it's been 10 years since the white paper, they talk about the Bitcoin's first felon. That's the time. I mean, they got to do their clickbait and everything, I guess. So, any thoughts on that? On the with the mainstream media's take on it? Still, after 10 years, they're talking about the first felon in a major article.
It's kind of inevitable. I mean, you know, like we talked about earlier and we talked about for a long time, the first people to get into a new technology are always people that are criminals, right? Like cars, shoes, it's always been that way. So, you know, I think, you know, it's going to take, I mean, maybe someday if we have mainstream adoption and it's been around for, you know, decades and stuff, that some of that stuff will go away. But while it's being adopted, that's just, you know, par for the course, I guess.
Yeah. Josh, you have any thoughts on this story, or did you read the story at all, or?
Yeah. So if it bleeds, it leads, and if it's related to crime or money, especially a large amount of either, I mean, that's going to be in the popular media's attention for sure. And plus, it's Charlie Shrem, who isn't necessarily baseline a criminal, but has done some things in the past that are interesting to say the least. And he's served his time and whatever. But yeah, so the Winklevi basically accusing him of still owing them 5,000 BTC, and Shrem bought a bunch of stuff last year, allegedly. I don't know if that's fact or not, but including housing and or real estate, yachts, cars, whatever. So he just was on their radars again because he may or may not owe them money.
Well, talking about it, it bleeds, it leads in criminality. There actually was a real tweet out there by the dude, Giacomo, you know about this, the Zcash guy was talking about criminals not wanting to use his Zcash. So explain to us what's going on there in that little Zcash drama that popped up this week.
Yeah, Zucco Wilcox, the guy that I really like because he has the nickname which is similar to my surname, so I can use the. So like 3 years ago, a friend of mine was in UK, and somebody was saying what a good cryptographer Zucco is, and so he came home respecting me so much because it was thinking that they were talking about me. So I will always love Zucco Wilcox, but I think that in general it doesn't. I mean, it's more like the marketing, advertising tool right now. Is not really the creator of the system. Is more like a guy paid a lot to advertise this altcoin. And I really don't like Zcash for a series of reasons, and especially this talk, this answer we are talking about now is very interesting. So this tweet was telling about the answer that Zucco answered to a question from the audience during his presentation. So this guy in the audience asked a very reasonable question. So if you created this wonderful anonymous cryptocurrency, which is so better than Bitcoin because it's more private and more anonymous, how comes that nobody is actually using it in the dark markets and in black markets online? So these markets are always using Bitcoins, and in some cases, some fringe cases, they're using Monero. If you really look at the transactions of any, of course, the transaction that you can link to. So if you can perform a statistical analysis of the transaction that you can link to these markets, you never find any Zcash transaction. Why is that? And the answer from Zucco was basically, that's because criminals don't like me, they don't trust me personally. Which I mean, it's a funny answer in a way. It's a very nice answer, but it's also very telling. Why shouldn't criminal trust Zucco in order to use Zcash? That speaks about complete perceived, at last, but it's actually real, but let's say perceived centralization. Actually, Zcash would be a terrible. So the first thing I would like to say about criminals is that we in this podcast, and everybody listening is a criminal in at least one jurisdiction on this planet. There is literally zero chances that you are not a criminal, at least by drinking alcohol or eating on Friday or masturbating or whatever in at least one country over this earth. Not in 12th century. Right now, in at least one jurisdiction, you are a criminal for doing whatever you are doing today, by definition of the overlap of any legal enforcement and request in this world. So we are all criminal. And why shouldn't we trust Zucco and then use Zcash if we are, as we are, all criminals? That's basically because Zcash doesn't offer any relevant anonymity or privacy, because basically you have the option to use these Z transactions, which are using Zcash snarks in order to obfuscate the relevant informations, and T transactions that are normal Bitcoin-like transactions. But you have the choice, and the UX doesn't informs you correctly about the choice, and the choice for privacy is more expensive to create, to broadcast, to download it, to validate, and so basically nobody uses it, and everybody uses normal T transactions, and so the anonymity set, which is the number of persons that you could be if I'm tracking you. So the number of person that you could pretend to be, and you can, when you are trying to hide, you have to hide in a number of people. You cannot hide if you are alone in the center of a big room. So you have to blend to blend into a group of people. So the anonymity set of any altcoins, included Monero and Dash and Zcash, is way smaller than the anonymity set of Bitcoin. So even with no obfuscation of base layer, Bitcoin offers a wider anonymity set than these other cryptocurrencies. But especially with Zcash, people is using a smaller anonymity set for normal Bitcoin-like transaction, and the transaction remained in the other part. The Z transaction are so few that if you're using those, you are obfuscating, but you're using an even smaller anonymity set, so it's trivial to anonymize you. And indeed, it's not difficult to imagine that that it was going to be something like this. I mean, eCash creators and Liberty Reserve creators, they were arrested because they were allowing people to transact with basically an independent digital currency with strong privacy and anonymity features, and with independence from the Federal Reserve. They were arrested, and the company closed. And Satoshi Nakamoto created not another company, but a decentralized system using a pseudonymity identity, and then he disappeared, not because he was just bored enough to do all this, but because this was necessary in order for the system not to be shut down. So let's ask yourself, why should the US, which are cracking down over WhatsApp cryptography and which are forcing Apple to insert backdoors into things, why should they allow a super private cryptocurrency to be launched and managed by a US-based for-profit company with a trademark in the US, the Zcash company, which is also making money directly in the code by with the fee, the developer fee? So if that's not, I mean, if that doesn't scream honeypot, I don't know what does. So yeah, I think that criminals, so we are more than right in not trusting my good friend and very nice person, Zucco.
Well, so again, one has to remember also that on the Winklevoss exchange, tying this to the Winklevi, we're going to tie it all together here, I guess. Gemini, you can get Zcash, correct? Josh, is that? I believe that's.
Yeah, that's correct.
So again, it shows you just how private it might or might not be.
I mean, it's optional privacy isn't privacy. Privacy by default is privacy, which is why if you have a choice between Zcash and Monero, you're using Monero all day, every day. It's a no-brainer. Like there's that's why people aren't using Zcash, because it's not private. It's just like it's marketed as a privacy coin, but it has really very little to do with privacy.
And you know, right? He is. It is cool that his last name, his first name, sounds like your last name, and gives you Giacomo, and gives you that attention. That is a positive for you, I guess. But he's cool. He's a figurehead, definitely. I think maybe you were looking for that word beforehand. And people, we're talking about putting people on pedestals. He's the genius they put on the pedestal over there. Now, before we move to the next,
he's a very charismatic guy. I don't want to, and he's also a very nice guy in person. So I'm joking about him all the time because I don't like Zcash, but he's very nice and very intelligent. Only in this case, I think that him, just as much as Edward Snowden, have been used as a marketing tool more than as scientists.
Like are ZK snarks cool? Do they work? Blah blah blah. Yeah, all that's great. It's like groundbreaking technology, but it's not privacy. Like it's not like fundamental base down. It's not privacy all the time. And the other thing about XMR, it's so good that other countries, including the Secret Service in the United States, is asking exchanges to delist it. So what we're seeing is XMR traded volume on BISC, which is a completely decentralized peer-to-peer, no KYC, no AML. It's basically become the XMR exchange because it's where everybody goes to just stay anonymous the whole time, which is it's a definitely a centralized point where there's a point of failure at this point for XMR transactions. But If you buy XMR on an exchange, then you de-anonymize yourself. But if you transact peer-to-peer, you don't. So that's the draw for Bisq anyway.
Well, this Monero situation is something to keep an eye on long term, because
for sure,
as we get into the future in terms of financialization and custodial services, these big companies like Fidelity that are going to have crypto portfolios for the people who can't control their own private keys, they are not going to include Monero, most likely. I mean, they're going to include Bitcoin. They're going to include Ethereum and Litecoin. So it will be very obvious at that, if that happens, if they totally exclude Monero from the fund, I think it will say something about the privacy aspects of Monero, that it won't be able to be argued anymore. Like, they're not touching this for a reason, because it really is anonymous. Now, again, I'm not a technical guru or anything like this, so I don't know how super duper anonymous it is, but I'm taking the word of the experts that it's and the criminals that it's better that, again, if a criminal screws up, he gets murdered. I mean, that's if it's not if he says this is anonymous and it's not anonymous, then someone's gonna wreck him, man. It's not gonna be fun for that dude. So they, on the dark market or whatever it's called out there, they're apparently, because I don't touch that stuff, that's what they use is the Monero. My long-term hope is that there's some second layer solution on top of Bitcoin that is just as good. And
well, if we project that further with Bitcoin, you could argue that one day, if something like Mimblewimble or some other privacy option is added to Bitcoin, it definitely won't be available on Coinbase, and it may or may not end up forking Bitcoin and ineffectively delisting Bitcoin on a lot of places. If it goes that far.
What Caitlin Long brought up on my show is that if it does get to that point, these corporations, like Fidelity, they'll just fork off their own Bitcoin. They'll be a Fidelity Bitcoin, basically. They'll be another. So that's a very interesting development there. I mean, as a holder of Bitcoin, I'm like, sure, let these corporations make their own version of Bitcoin that is, cool to them, that it doesn't involve crime or whatever. Try to decriminalize it. Sure, I'll get your free Fidelity coin, and it'll end up just like all the other forks have ended up. I mean, that's what's out there now. Yes, Chris.
So actually, one thing that's kind of related to this is the Liquid sidechain that Blockstream came out. It has confidential transactions in it, and they just released it. So you were talking about doing it on layer 2, and actually that's possible today. I don't know if people are actually using that yet, and that has some of the big institutions supporting it. So, maybe they're open to it, but I don't know if maybe Liquid's only going to be like them trading back and forth to each other, or if it's actually going to be open to regular people. Not sure, but it is available.
I can answer to this. Liquid is not open in the participation of block signing and escrowing, so the trust model is closed between a set of people, but the user model is actually open. So right now the code for the wallet is not released open source, but as soon as it is, I know it's already there in a few months, people can on their own home computer install a Liquid node, validate blocks independently, but not confirm blocks because they need federates, and they can transact confidential transactions. So it will be used, but confidential transactions in Liquid are just one of the example of the privacy techniques. You have Lightning Network itself is a huge privacy and fungibility improvement, because basically when you pay with Lightning, you cannot see what happens during the payment. When you're writing a payment in Lightning, you just know who is giving it to you and where you are supposed to pass it, but you don't know where it originates and where it ends. So basically Lightning is a huge privacy layer. And then you have like the things of Wasabi wallets, the Chaumium, CoinJoin. Then you have the things of Samurai wallets, so Whirlpool, Stone Wallet, and Ricochet. And then you have like the mixers like Tumblebit. And then you have also, there is a lot of things. I'm not sure that the consequences will be the listing, because I mean, right now with Monero, that's what we're seeing. And that's, as you say, the proof that Monero is scary for some sound reasons. And I agree, it should be. But if you think about it, physical gold, if you buy physical gold from an institution, That's not illegal. They have to know who you are and where the money you are buying gold with is coming from with KYC ML. Then you buy, then you store. And when you want to withdraw your gold, they will just ask you why. They will make you a lot of friction, a lot of questions. But then it's not that they are delisting gold because gold coins can be passed anonymously, like bearer instrument between people. So gold, physical gold, is completely anonymous, and nobody is delisting it. So I think that right now they are doing the move against Monero because they're still confused. Like, for example, the fact of creating a KYC Bitcoin will be the typical example of huge confusion, because that means that you don't understand that if you are forking Bitcoin to make it not private, there is no point to have something like Bitcoin at all. Because if it's not private, then you can have identity miners, and then you can have basically no mining at all and just identity signers, and then you can have a federation or even just one PayPal server doing whatever Bitcoin can do, even better from an efficiency point of view, but worse from a fragility point of view.
Whoa, now. Pound that freaking like button, people. Giacomo on fire. By the way, Giacomo, what is that shirt you got on there?
This is one of the first projects of the people in blockchain lab in Milan. People from Eternity Wall and others, and my wife Mir created this scam coin bot. So you can follow him or she or it on Twitter, and it will tweet the new scam coin, also with new white papers and the new ICOs and new scams of every kind. Any few minutes. So sometimes the grammar is not updated very frequently anymore. A few years ago it was updated very frequently, but it's still funny. And now a lot of people is using the scam coin bot. So let's buy scam coins and follow scam coin bot.
So what do you, going back to something that just popped in my head, would you say you're a fan of Monero then? Or I mean, because you are a big Bitcoin guy, but do you want to have associations with it? Do you, or do you want everybody to stick with Bitcoin?
I don't own any Monero. I don't think I will ever. Okay, nobody owns Monero, and everybody lost the private keys. But I don't own Bitcoin as well. Okay, but seriously, even if I was not concerned about my personal security, I will not own any Monero, because I think that in the long run, altcoins, even interesting altcoins, do not make any sense. In particular, Monero is very interesting because it's an experiment of trade-offs different than Bitcoins that is interesting scientifically as an experiment. It's an experiment conducted in a very responsible way. So the main maintainer, Fluffy Pony, doesn't promise impossible technological science fiction things like many other altcoin pumpers. It doesn't try to get people buying Monero. Actually, with the prank in New York 2 years ago, it got a lot of people stop buying Monero because it's trying to make it unreliable as an investment, because it is long-term unreliable as an investment. So I like the attitude toward Bitcoin. They are not lying about Bitcoin and about altcoins. They are doing something scientifically interesting, because using ring signatures or confidential transaction with bulletproof is something that can advance science for Bitcoin as well. And I think that in the short run, somebody may try to use Monero. I mean, if somebody uses Monero in the black market, I'm not automatically thinking that he's doing something stupid. He maybe have a point, is done correctly. While if somebody is using Zcash for the black market, he's just following marketing and is doing something dangerous and stupid. But with Monero, there is, and it's basically the only altcoin with some kind of transactional use, except for Bitcoin right now. I don't think that in the long run it will exist. And I don't think that, or maybe as a collectible, but it will not exist as a functioning money. And I don't think that it was the best way to launch this experiment with a new coin created, because if everybody did that, we would have infinite inflation if the market accepted it. So I think that the best way would be side chains or proof of burn or fork coin, so airdrop, or just as a fourth option, a new mined altcoin, and as the last option, the ICO or the developer funding. So they choose the fourth best, so the second worst possible way to do that, creating a new mined coin, which for me is something unsustainable. And but except for that, I mean, I like following the development of Monero. I'm interested. If something happens in Monero, I read it. If something happens in Ethereum or Dentcoin, I don't read it except for ridiculing it.
I like how you compare Ethereum to Dentcoin there. Speaking of Ethereum, Josh, you actually did you published an article recently with analyzing the Ethereum chart. Now, we can talk about charts and all that stuff. I'm not a big fan of the charts, but actually, if you, a lot of guys are out there. So you follow, Josh does all sorts of analysis of charts. He's a technical, but dude, you believe in the real world too, Josh. So I think your charts show that Ethereum's not doing too well. But what do you think about real world Ethereum? Is there a use? What do you see for the future of Ethereum? What do you see for the future of Monero, Josh?
I like Monero. It does what it says it does better than anything else. So it's got a use case right there. Ethereum's got a lot of competitors. Whether or not you agree that they're on the same par or the same intellectual level is another story. But the biggest thing with Ethereum right now that I'm looking at is the inflation. The annual inflation is still 7+% until after January, when Constantinople goes in at the earliest. So that's going to continually have mining supply pressure on price. The trend, based on trend analysis of technical indicators, like, it doesn't look too good. Bitcoin certainly looks better than Ethereum in that respect, just based on trend.
Well, you know, Ethereum does have that centralized figurehead, though, that can, you know, come up with some positive. Hey, if he does something right, if he gets in some news stories again, he can really, you know, it could pump the price. I mean, that's something to be factored in also. Speaking of centralized figureheads and pumping the price, Chris, you know about, you've heard, like I've heard this morning, and seen that Bcash's price has pumped by 7%, and there's some rumors out there. What's going on, Chris, with the fork rumors of Bcash and the like?
So yeah, I mean, I saw a couple tweets. I think the same ones most of us saw here, and there's conflicting information. I think the main one that most people saw, though, was that Roger Ver was supporting N-Chain's side of the fork, and apparently that made the price go up. I don't know why. I think the other thing that I read that was interesting about it was that there's going to be no replay protection. So that, you know, that's kind of, if I held Bcash, which I don't, I would be concerned about that, you know, there's no replay protection. And, you know, I don't know. We haven't seen a fork like that in Bitcoin, so we don't really have a precedent for what's going to happen. But, you know, I guess it'll be interesting to watch.
Well, I think when a centralized figurehead over there makes a clear statement, it assures the market that, oh, everything's going to be all right. This will be the winning fork. I think, I mean, and I've said this many times on the show, but on November 15th, I think they're going to end up with two Bcashes, 3 Bcashes. There's one called Bstash that's actually forking off from it no matter what. But
and Bitcoin Core. That's what my favorite is. Bitcoin Core.
Oh yeah, that's a fork. Yeah, I know. That's a play of words there. It confuses everyone. But November 15th, you know, fake Satoshi will go his own way, and I think the miners will go their own way. We'll see how it goes there. The supposed Satoshi's vision versus the ABC version of it. But again, this is all breaking news. That the rumor that's going on that King of the Trolls has picked a side, and we'll have to see how that develops. Now you got to tell us about what's going on in Puerto Rico in a second. But I do want to talk about the tether situation.
Hold on, wait. Let's go back to the Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, I also had a quick comment.
Okay. So I'm moving so fast here. Pound that like fun, people.
I'm just thinking, like, it's just opening this whole can of worms of there are going to be multiple Bitcoin Cashes, yes. Who owns most of Bitcoin Cash? Most likely it's Bitmain, Jihan. They're definitely on the rich list based on their IPO docs. My guess is they haven't really sold anything since then. So they're going to make a bunch just on the fork. And if it forks twice, 3 times. They're going to make whatever if they sell. If they're able to sell, I doubt that they're going to be able to because it's not going to be supported everywhere. So there's that. Plus, there's the Bitmain consideration regarding mining power. The coin that's going to survive is going to be the coin with the mining power. That's going to be whatever Bitmain decides, just because they have the most of it, in the Bitcoin Cash crowd, at least to my knowledge. And then lastly, another big holder of Bitcoin Cash is the Mt. Gox treasury. So they're going to have another thing to deal with of like, not only are they holding Bitcoin Cash and all the other Bitcoin forks, but now they're holding forks of forks in past November 15th. So that's going to be super interesting if they actually distribute all that stuff.
Okay, that's an interesting point about the Mt. Gox people, because they still have the people's Bcash. And so if it forks they're going to own that too. That's the craziness of this space, man. The forks, the crypto dividends, whatever you want to call it. It adds a whole new aspect. When people are holding your private keys for you, they end up owing you more and more. That's why you got to control your own private keys, people.
And I'll throw a link. But one last thing, I'll just throw a link in the chat about the Mt. Gox coins. You can see like how much they own and whatever. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, I also was about to comment that one of the reasons that people could be actually buying Bcash in the light of the new declaration. Yeah, one thing is that a central figure taking a stance may be somehow reassuring, but also the other thing is that there is this theory about crypto dividends. So if there is a fork coming, I should buy the coin, so I will have 2 and I will sell 1 and I will profit. Actually, I think this is a misconception, because the fallacy in this reasoning is that it's counterfactual. You don't know how much the same coin will grow up in value without. So we know empirically that Bitcoin after half of August was worth more as Bitcoin plus Bcash airdrop than just Bitcoin before. But we don't know how much Bitcoin would have worth. So usually when you have the same demand splitting over a more wide supply, and especially when you break network effects. So when you have a network and you break the network, the two networks have less value individually than summed up their value is way less than the value of the whole network, because you have the breaking of the network effects. So a fork, let's call it that way, but mostly an airdrop of a new altcoin, with people buying the new altcoin or selling the new altcoin, which is airdropped to owner of the original coin. This kind of thing, if it works, it should break the network effect and diminishing the value of the coin. Even if you see it rising, you don't see how much it would have risen if that was not happened. But the strange thing, the paradoxical thing, is that now that's a prophecy that self fulfills, because now if enough people thinks that they can buy Bcash in order to wait for the airdrop and then have more Bcash, then they will do that. And then in a way that's creating more demand, a specific kind of unsustainable demand for the fork. So that's also very interesting. Another thing that I would like to add is that this kind of drama is not interesting technically. Also, I mean, the Satoshi, the Bitcoin ABC side has very few developers like that on X, but at least they have a couple of developers. The N-chain side, they don't have just one technical guy. So what they're saying is just crazy bullshit from a technical point of view. But it's interesting socially, because somebody like Fake Toshi, Craig Wright, they have to create continuous political drama in order to survive. If you remember about that, when first Fake Toshi came to present himself as Satoshi, he created a lot of attention because of that. Then he couldn't sign, of course. Then he said, "I'm sorry, I will disappear forever. I will not appear anywhere on the internet, on TV, and I will just disappear." Then when he came back a few months later, he didn't came back just discussing like, yeah, there is Bitcoin. It was coming back, taking a side into a debate and a fight, because if you do that, you can have at least one part of the debate which will forgive anything stupid or fraudulent you did in the past, because yeah, you could be a bad person, but you are our bad person, so we will forgive you for anything. And so Craig Wright radicalized anti-Bitcoin positions after the signature drama, only after. And right now he's radicalizing this internal debate even more because it needs to radicalize things in order to stay relevant. So sociologically speaking, when you look at centralized altcoins, technology is not as much as important as personal dynamics.
Yeah, that was a beautiful summation of the whole situation that's going on over there. Now, I will say this in the chat. Sam Wong says the sum of the parts is not going to be bigger than the parts in a bear market, and I that's why this is going to be interesting to see how it turns out, because I think it will be. I think if it splits into two, that it will be more valuable than it was previously. And I know it's irrational, but that's just the way it works there. And people are starting to buy it now because they think they're going to get 2 Bcashes. And we'll never know how much it would have been worth if there was just 1 Bcash. As we'll never know that. So who can? People are going on, what they've seen before. So we are in a bear market. We're definitely in an altcoin bear market. It will be interesting to see if it does split into 2 clearly different Bcashes because of their drama. If the sum of the parts will be more than what it was beforehand. I think it will. I think it will, and maybe that could spur a bull market in altcoins again. I don't know. Chris, what do you think of that? You there, Chris? What happened? Chris?
Image is frozen. So
yeah, it's like he may have dropped.
Okay.
I wanted to hear about Puerto Rico too.
Yeah, no, he's got to come back. We got to hear about. But Josh, okay, what are you actually agreed with Sam, Josh? I saw in the chat.
Oh, about
some of the parts.
Yeah. So it probably, they're not going to be worth more, certainly, at least now. But over time, who knows? But there's lots of like game theory stuff. Like, where's the hash rate going to go? Is it going to be enough to support the network? Is it going to be enough to support any of the networks? What are the exchanges going to do? Are they going to start listing all these random forks for no reason? I don't know.
And which figurehead will support? Will King of the Trolls support this one or the other one? Who knows?
Will this split the network as far as the Bcash people? Like, I haven't visited RBTC lately, but I'm sure there's some threads about that.
Well, let's move on to another altcoin, because it's nothing but an altcoin, and I don't know why people care about these darn stable. Well, no, Josh, you know why they care about the stable coins, because everybody's a trader. The tether FUD has gone away. You had a few things to say about that.
Yeah, so really at the end of the day, it was Bitfinex's and Tether's fault for not being forward with all this information and saying, like, we're having trouble with banking at the moment. There are delays in wires, blah, blah, blah. If they would have been out front and all that, then people would have listened to that instead of the other people who are constantly fudding anything related to Tether all the time, always. So the market responded by dumping Tether. And it's important to realize this is not the peg. This is the market rate for Tether. The market rate for Tether dropped below $1 and is still recovering. And the premium for Bitcoin on Bitfinex and all the other stuff on Bitfinex jumped up as people were exiting Bitfinex because they couldn't get wires out. They couldn't get Tether redeemed at the time because of the banking issues. So now we just had a Tether thing saying that they're with Deltec Bank. They're in the Bahamas. This letter saying that they have 1.8 billion that's signed. Pretty funny looking signature by the Deltec person. And now today we have an article out of Bloomberg saying, like, Deltec isn't responding to our comments about whether or not they're the Tether bank. And it's just like, it will never end. But the point is, as a trader, you need sometimes to go in and out of stable coins for volatility reasons, for volatility risk. It's quicker to send Tether between exchanges sometimes, or any other stable coin. So there are reasons to have them around. But at the same time, I tell everybody, don't be loyal to any one exchange. Don't be loyal to anything. You can move your money anywhere at any time. So, if you feel in your heart of hearts that Tether is dying, sell your Tether at whatever the market rate is and take that hit. But if not, then just wait it out, because Bitfinex has proven itself as far as being anti-fragile in some respect, based on their past history.
All right, Giacomo, is Bitcoin your stable coin? What's your what's your take on this stable coin monstrosities that we're entering into?
Well, first of all, I will not call them stable coins because they're pegged to fiat, and fiat is everything but stable in the long run, and especially is not stable in the short run when we have political crises. So I don't know if euro will be stable as a purchasing power. It is right now in the short term. But for example, dollars lost 97% of their purchase power over a century. So I will not call that stability. But assuming that this fiat coin are stable in the short term, and you need those as volatility havens during, I don't know, bearish markets or too volatile markets, then I really don't understand, except for one reason, why you shouldn't just use the internal stable coin of every single exchange, which is the USD account of the same exchange. So if you go to an exchange, you sell Bitcoin for USD and you keep USD in that exchange, that's the same trust model of the Circle or Tether or other kinds of stable coin. The only difference could be, and that would be reasonable, legal arbitrage to bypass KYC AML. So if I buy coin from Coinbase and I sell and I have dollars, I cannot move dollars from there. But if I buy Tether from Tether company, I have to do KYC, AML, and everything, so I'm regulated. But then in the secondary market, I can transfer this stuff in an unregulated way because Omni is kind of liquid, so I can do that with good plausible deniability for Tether. And when somebody comes back to redeem with Tether, they don't have to look at the history and say, no, you cannot redeem because in the secondary market, this coin has been in the hands of Julian Assange. So I'm looking forward for a better technology to do that, because with Omni, it's trivial to de-anonymize Tethers, and so it's not good. But with something more good, like liquid confidential assets, or maybe RGB project or other projects with more fungibility, that would be the only interesting use case for me. Legal arbitrage, or another form of legal arbitrage, which will be the regulators. They are not regulating the fiat coin because they are just too confused to understand what that is going on. So if you're moving, so PayPal is a fiat coin. So when you're moving dollars on PayPal, the regulators are going to go to PayPal and ask them to do all the anti-money laundering bullshit, or sorry, let's say paperwork. The word was paperwork. And so why they are not doing the same thing with Circle or with Coinbase? The answer could be because they still don't understand what the hell is going on, and they will eventually. So you have like a window of opportunity of regulatory arbitrage in time, or maybe you have it in space, like PayPal could move coins without regulation in Puerto Rico, or I don't know, or Liechtenstein or in Malta or whatever, but not in the US. But it's easier to move coins in the secondary market in the US and the primary market only in this particular heavens. So that would be geographical regulatory arbitrage, which is interesting. So that's the only reason to use fiat coins.
Okay. Well, one thing I'll add quickly to that is many of these exchanges don't have USD listed on the exchange. So the workaround is USDT.
Yeah, that's the bottom line there. All right, so let us hear about Puerto Rico. We're all very curious. Tell us what's going on there, Chris.
Okay, so yeah, I moved to Puerto Rico earlier this year, and the reason I moved here is because of there was a law that was passed in, I think it was 2012, called Act 22, and basically it allows U.S. citizens to move there, and you can not pay capital gains. So it really makes sense for a lot of Bitcoiners potentially to move here, because you could. The good thing about here is like you can move here and you don't have to give up your U.S. citizenship, but you can still avoid the taxes. Also, when you exit the U.S., you get hit with an exit tax. So by moving to Puerto Rico, that avoids that. So you can kind of wait and see if Bitcoin goes up and sell it at that point. I'm a long-term holder myself, but the thing to keep in mind is that everyone's going to sell at some point. Even if you die, your heirs are going to sell. So that's kind of that was my thought behind it. So yeah, if you guys have any questions.
Well, I do. Now, you've been there for a little while now. Have you met some more Bitcoin people? How are the meetups there? The meetup that I went to there, I mean, is like most of the people were not from Puerto Rico originally. They seemed to be interested in Puerto Rico for the same reason you were.
Yeah, I need to go to more of the meetups. I've gone to a couple of them and met some cool people, just kind of chit-chatted. I've actually seen a few people just around town that I knew from like meetups and stuff in the US that happened to come here. So that was kind of interesting. I think you met some people too. Yeah.
Yeah. Say to the world who you saw sitting at the Starbucks that time.
Rhett Creighton. Actually, I've seen him like 3 times actually. So yeah, he's around here. There's other people. I know there's a bunch of people that live here. I think you met someone from Seattle that you mentioned. So you just kind of do see people that you either knew or like kind of knew of. I wouldn't say that happens a lot, but you know, it happened to me a few times. So yeah, there's some people over here. There's also Brock Pierce who lives in Old San Juan. I haven't run into him, but there's a bunch of people in that group that are over there. But yeah, I found that I think a lot of people did kind of move just for the capital gains. And, you know, I mean, me personally, I'm not going to start an altcoin or something like that. Or, you know, I mean, maybe at some point I'll think about starting a company. There's another tax law called Act 20, which allows you to start a company in Puerto Rico that where you can pay 4% tax, which is pretty low compared to what you pay in the US at least. So that's a possibility, but I think more of the people, especially in Bitcoin, have come just for the Act 22 to you know, not pay capital gains tax, particularly like the people that are doing trading and stuff like that, like Rhett, for instance. You know, it really makes sense for that use case, not just in Bitcoin, but in any kind of trading, really, because it's both short term and long term.
Yeah, well, Peter Schiff has moved there, and he's no Bitcoiner.
Yes.
How's how's like the infrastructure there, like electricity, water, all that stuff? Is that like back to normal?
So I haven't had any problems with electricity, but after the hurricane, like everyone I meet, they say there's these horror stories about like having their electricity off for 5 months and stuff like that. I live in San Juan, and the closer that's the biggest city. So if you live in like the biggest city areas, the impact will definitely be less than if you live way out in the country. Then, you know, you live way out in the country, you better have like your own solar panels and battery backups and, you know, generators and stuff. But yeah, in the main city, they did have water off for like 3 days or 4 days or something. But you know, after a few days, they got that on. That's the really critical thing, because you can survive without electricity for a while. But water, you can't last very long. So yeah, it just depends on where you were. So yeah.
Gotcha.
I enjoyed my time there, and in terms of safety concerns, if you're from Baltimore like me, you'll find it pleasant there. I mean, there's some empty buildings there, but again, if you're some hipster from some East Coast city or post-industrial city, you'll feel quite comfortable there in San Juan. I mean, there's some empty buildings or whatever, and some people can't take that. You know, they think that's ghetto. But it's, you know, the beach and everything. It is an interesting development. We're going to keep our eyes on it. And Chris, you'll have to return to the show and tell us anything that's changing over there. But it is interesting. There are definitely people taking advantage of this law. So we're here at the end of the show now. I wanted Josh to chime in real quick. You know, I'm not a TA type of guy, but give us some Bitcoin TA type of stuff that you think people might be interested in.
Sure. So the levels I'm looking at are real simple for Bitcoin. Below 5,800 is a massive cliff. That's going to head us towards 2-3K eventually, if that happens. The other cliff up I'm looking at is 6,800 to 7,100 based on the 200 and the cloud, for anybody who knows what that is. But so we're just a really tight range. Volatility is low. Everybody is feeling the low volatility and the sideways, just as we did if you were here for like April 2016. It's very similar to that.
You mentioned the 5,800. That's the Hoffman line, the $100 billion valuation of when Bitcoin is around that price. It's 100 billion. Do you think that means anything, or is that coincidental there?
I haven't heard of that, so that may mean something, may not mean something. We talk about like psychological levels a lot in trading, and that could be a psychological level for people who are looking at that sort of stuff, which is perfectly reasonable. I remember all the headlines when we broke 100 billion. That was huge.
Yeah,
definitely. I don't know. That's a good question, though.
Yeah. That's hey, man. That's something. As the technical. I like the real world stuff, man. But hey, that's what you do. The charts, the magical charts. You're looking at them. Again, people remember 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. Don't get fudded out by charts and stuff. But Josh is rocking it, and he's linked to below and everything. So let's get everybody's conclusionary remarks. We'll do Chris, then Josh, and then we'll end it with Giacomo, because he's always got lots of fun stuff to say. So Chris, anything that we left out, anything you want to bring up?
No, I mean, I think we covered a lot of stuff. Thanks for having me on. I've been a fan of your show for a long time, so it's really cool to get a chance to actually participate. It's nice. So thanks for all you do.
Oh yeah,
and
man.
pound the like button.
Follow him, dudes. He's awesome. And hey, it's a guy that I've met in person. He's on the show. That's it's real life and on the internet. I know you, so that's awesome. Josh, your final thoughts? Anything that was left off?
I don't think so. There's a little bit about Vitalik saying he's going to step away from the limelight a little bit, not necessarily like programming or being a part of the community, but he just wants to be less of a central figurehead, which I think is a good thing, even though people are going to give him crap for it either way.
Yeah.
I don't really have anything else. I mean, just sit tight if you're a trader. And
that's it. But when you're already in this central figurehead type of position, you cannot do anything. If you talk more, they're going to blame you, or if you talk less, they're going to blame you. So you're stuck. And that was the same thing that happened with Charlie Lee. If he sells now, they're going to blame him. If he sells in the future, that's the big difference. With Bitcoin, the founder is, and we're tying this. It's come full circle now. The show, we started talking about Satoshi, we'll end talking about Satoshi, I guess. And that there's no drama with him because he doesn't exist anymore, basically. So, Giacomo. Tell us what we left off here, man. Anything you want to talk about, what you're doing in Italy, anything you can promote.
Actually, I moved all my business in Switzerland, Italian part of Switzerland, so still pretty close to Italy. Now I'm in Italy with my family because I'm sick and I'm with my daughter, with my parents. So I'm in Italy right now, but I'm living and working in Switzerland. Italy itself is it's an off-topic, but very interesting argument that could play some role in the next global financial collapse. So looking forward to see if and when and how it happens. But it could be interesting for Bitcoin as well as consequences. So, but there's not a specific reason to talk about that right now. I think we covered pretty much everything about Vitalik. There was also the interesting song on stage during DevCon in which the singer made all the people sing a song with a lot of rules and commandments. And one of the commandments was don't ICO. And that was very rich from a community that started with a super big ICO and that then proliferated basically only as an ICO platform, with the leader on stage posing as pampers of all the main ICOs before the DAO. Basically, Vitalik face was promoting actively a lot of ICO receiving tokens in exchange. And so the ICO enabling any other ICO is now singing song about Dawn ICO, which is very, very funny in a pyramid kind of way. Like, we are the top, so we can, but you are the base, so you cannot anymore. Sorry, we already did it for you. So be happy and sing and dance. That was very rich.
Yeah, very much so. Keep it positive. Hey, you bring up Switzerland. So Switzerland's more crypto friendly than Italy, you're trying to say?
Then Italy, yes, definitely. It's everything friendly more than Italy. Italy is a mess for any kind of business, especially innovative business, especially financial business. Italy is good for vacation, but it's bad for business. But Switzerland it was appearing as a crypto paradise a few months ago, but now they actually started to understand what that means from the point of view of ICOs, consumer protection laws, and anti-money laundering and all that stuff. So they're restricting more what you can do and what you can't do. So Switzerland is now, it's interesting, like all my clients are in Switzerland. There are banks actually enabling their customers to buy Bitcoin directly from the bank. So the banks are becoming exchanges in a way, just in a very hidden, shadowy, local way without a lot of visibility. But if you think about that, that makes sense, because what is a Bitcoin exchange? A centralized, trust-based, fiduciary, regulated Bitcoin exchange like Coinbase. It's a bank. So why not leave the same job to your pre-existent insured and super regulated bank, since the work of a centralized exchange so far is just the work of a bank? So I would prefer a Swiss bank over Coinbase. At least Swiss banks have some tradition of attention to financial privacy and some money, historically at least, not recently, while Coinbase doesn't have that kind of tradition. So if I really have to choose, I will go with Swiss banks over Coinbase.
Interesting. Well, I'm glad you're going to be on the ground now in Switzerland. That's good. We'll get more information from you about what's going on there. Remember, Bitcoin is your own private Swiss bank, though. So, hey, man, that's the way I look at it. So, awesome show today, dudes. Thank you very much, everyone. Remember, we do this show every Friday. The This Week in Bitcoin show. It varies. I think next week Simon Dixon's going to be on. There's your little preview. We're working on that. Anyway, I post a new show here every single day of the year. Otherwise, at disruptmeister.com. Follow me at TechBalt, TechBalt, TechBalt.com. You can watch all the old This Week in Bitcoin shows. And of course, tomorrow night is the Beyond Bitcoin show. So everybody, I'm Adam Meister, Bitcoin Meister, Disrupt Meister. Remember to subscribe to this channel, like this video, share this video, pound that freaking like button. Shabbat Shalom. We will see you later. Bye-bye.